So welcome to another webinar by 99X. So my name is Gavin, and I'll be talking on the topic about integrating design thinking into business strategy. I'm Gavin. I'm a senior UX designer at 99X. I have over 5 years of experience in the industry. So yeah, let's get started. The few discussion points we're going to talk about is design-led strategy, research and defining problem statements, prototyping, and product ideation. So we're going to go about the whole iterative process on how we're going to talk about combining design thinking with corporate strategy and how to create a design strategy. Yeah. The first topic will be design-led strategy, how we're going to combine design thinking with corporate strategy. So I'm going to talk about a bit about the introductions about each topic, and then we can go on from there. To talk about design thinking, such as the introduction to design thinking. So first, let's clearly define what design thinking is. Design thinking is like a methodology, or we could even see it as a framework that provides like a solution-based approach to solving problems. It's useful in tackling complex problems by understanding what our end users want. It encourages creative brainstorming and gives you a hands-on prototyping. And then at the end, you get to test your assumptions. You get to validate your assumptions. So that's what design thinking is. In the UX world, we consider that as the mother of all processes, where each new process is usually born from design thinking. Design thinking is quite unique compared with other forms of problem solving. It's that it's a non-linear process. It's rather focused on outcome delivery rather than focusing on a precise problem. It's a good framework to come up with a couple of solutions to a vast problem rather than a direct solution to one single problem. That's like the advantage of design thinking, and that's why it stands out from other forms of problem solving. When it comes to design thinking, on the bottom of the graphic, you could see there's two methods of thinking. There's divergent thinking and convergent thinking. When these two combine, that's where the ideal design thinking formulation happens. If I were to explain what divergent and convergent thinking is, first we'll talk about divergent thinking. It refers to producing as many possible solutions to a given problem, to like a wide problem. We would go more depth into that in the ideation phase of design thinking. Convergent thinking is actually quite the opposite of divergent thinking. It's kind of the opposite of design thinking as well, but it is a very unique part. It is a very important part of design thinking. Convergent thinking is more of coming up with the single best solution to a given problem. And when you combine both these main modes of thinking, that's where ideal design thinking happens. Design thinking has a strong focus on creating human-centric solutions. So because you really get to understand your end users' motivations, you can really empathize from their standpoint. At its core, design thinking is it's all about people. It's all about your end users. So let's say if you are attempting to develop a solution to a problem, be it a software problem, a product, a physical product, you tend to ideate in line with what your end users would want, and that's what the design thinking is all about. And there's some another characteristic of design thinking. Design thinking is that it minimizes uncertainty. Like it de-risks or reduces risk of failure of when you're creating a certain solution to a certain problem. Since you are always hand in hand with your end users, you always get insights from them, and it's a very iterative process. since you always engage with your potential or your end users from the beginning of the process. So if you could see this empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test from the beginning itself, you would be you would get hands-on with your end users, and you would derive insights from them, and then you would push those insights. You would ideate those insights into your possible solution to the problem you're trying to solve. And due to this, design thinking has a strong focus on to be very human-centered. And this framework is incredible for developing solutions for highly complex requirements or highly complex problems. So we usually call these highly complex problems as wicked problems. And wicked problems are, of course, as you call it, it's quite wicked. It's very complex. So that's where design thinking comes in. And since it's a non-linear process, you could come up with a bunch of solutions for design thinking for that specific wicked problem. And wicked problems are quite common in the business world, be it a software product or a real life product or physical product. It's quite common. And a lot of companies, a lot of product teams, they come across these wicked problems. And if you could utilize design thinking into your wicked problems, you would be able to come up with possible solutions for that specific product success. So design thinking, it's more of synthesizing a collective expertise. So you usually work in teams when you're doing ideation. You come and develop a realistic solution, and then you could present it to your stakeholders, stuff like that. That's how it usually happens in UX and UX teams when you're coming up with complex solutions for complex problems. And you would, as you could see, you would probably come up with the solutions, the empathize, define, and ideate stage, and then you go on to create a prototype, be it a physical product or a product with a user interface, like such as the software product. Then you go on to create a prototype that would enable you to test your possible solution and to see if it actually works in the real world. So that's like the core of design thinking. And design thinking, it's not just about applying it to software products or physical products. It can be applied into any setting where you have to engage with your end users. So such as a corporate, such as a company. So you can use it for strategic planning, corporate policy design, or even general brainstorming sessions. So it doesn't necessarily have to be applied to a product or a product solution. So that's what design thinking really is. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of ideating possible solutions to your wide problem, to your wicked problem. So then we would go on to talk about what corporate strategy is. So every business, anywhere in the world, a small startup, a multinational, every one of these businesses or corporates, they do have a strategy implemented on how they should run their business. So to put it in line, a corporate strategy is a traditional method that businesses or other organizations use to identify, to plan and achieve their long-term goals and objectives. There's when it comes to corporate strategy, it's not just one strategy. It could be a couple of small strategies from different departments, which are grouped together to create a final blueprint of a corporate strategy. There could be standalone strategies, and they could be even smaller milestones. So if we were to talk about corporate strategy more in depth, so some of the common components of corporate strategy would be risk management, finance strategy, people and culture, and customer acquisition. And if you look more into depth about a lot of companies, they would have strategies for each of these components. So if you were to talk about a bit more into each of these components, we would, so let's say, for example, risk management. That's usually a framework that enables the top level executives or the leaders of that specific business to really see how their entity or their corporate uh, molds together when they have delegate to make decisions, how their hierarchies are set up, and then if you talk about financial strategy, that is basically all the ins and outs of the money of the business, how first the balance sheet to see their net positions, to see their assets, to see their liabilities, and then you have your income statements to see how much revenue and expenses come in a particular period for that business. It also provides a net financial position of that business. So that would be the financial strategy. And then you would have your cash flow to see how money is going in and out of the business. If they have enough cash reserves to fulfill some of the corporate's responsibilities. And then you go on to people and culture. So people and culture strategy is quite critical for a business success nowadays, because a lot of businesses are culture driven, and it all depends on its employees. Like most of the businesses nowadays, they depend on the employees to take their business forward. So a people and culture strategy is quite important in that sense. So it usually a strategy, the component people and culture usually, it includes a roadmap of a desired workplace culture. Startups have a different, a growth firm has a different. So it's important where your company is situated. Let's say for a startup, if it's a startup or it's in its growth stage, it is important to clearly identify that and implement this appropriate strategy. So then we would go on to talk about customer acquisition. So customer acquisition basically sales. So this would be I think one of the most important driving factors of business nowadays, because without customers, they wouldn't be able to generate revenue. So that's revenue is what basically upholds the business in terms of longevity and profitability. And so there's always, and firms always have a strategy towards that as well. So of course, each business would have it in different, would have different sales strategies. Some would want for example, increase web traffic. Others would want brand recognition. It depends on the business domain as well. So these are some of the few components of what a corporate strategy really is. So we could probably go into what design strategy is. So first, let's really try to understand what design strategy is. So it's quite a new subject where we would combine both design thinking principles as well as corporate strategy. And when you combine these two, you get design strategy. So it is used to, it is like not a traditional method. It's something which companies are adopting more and more to get that iterative process into their own strategies. So because it in turn helps them achieve their long-term objectives and goals, and in turn that helps their business grow more and more. So design strategy, it's quite common nowadays in startups. It's coming up a lot in startups nowadays due to its iterative process, where they would want to get hands-on with their end users. And even to build their company up to implement it into their corporate strategies, to build a pretty good company, they would implement that. And so it's quite a very mixed concept, because every firm I believe does it differently. It's developed in a way according to each company's corporate strategy. So it has a bit of the elements of corporate strategy and a bit of elements from design thinking, and you combine them the two. And And then you get, users on the front line giving you iterative feedback. And based on that, you get your employees giving you feedback. Based on that, you adjust your policies. And due to all that, you get to your strategies get to thrive and your business gets to thrive as well. So design strategy, again, it's also another framework. It can be used to, see elements of corporate strategy and design strategy together. So let's talk about the business model canvas. So a business model canvas is quite common. It's been there for a while, and it's actually a great tool. Even currently, right now, it's quite a great tool to access the main components of how each business work together and how they all fit together. So this is also very like a core part of design strategy, because it gives you like an overview of, it's basically like a lengthy business plan put into one page. That's what we would describe what a business model canvas is. So we usually segment how different departments or how different strategies work in an organization. And you can then, it would be easy to identify the gaps in that strategy accordingly. And again, this is a globally recognized tool where a lot of companies use it. Companies use it for their own business as well. So now, if you look at the business model canvas closely, it's comprised of nine sections or boxes. So we have key partners, key activities, key resources, value propositions, customer relationships, channels, custom segments, cost structure, and revenue streams. So we could probably go into depth about this. So key partners. So if you talk about key partners, they are usually third parties that a firm would draw on. They are the ones who would deliver. It's how a company would deliver value to their customers. So think about, like, who, like, let's say you come up with a product, how you would deliver a solution. So that's who your key partners are. So again, key partners, basically, it's like a segment of your end users of how you're going to do customer acquisition. So that's where your key partners come in. And then if you look at key activities, these are the actions that must be taken for their specific firm or business to take action and to deliver value to their customers. And if in completing this section of the business model canvas, you need to consider what activities do you think your business needs to undertake to deliver value. Do you need to develop new products, new features, or even provide new services? And do you need to undertake any research and development? Do you need to develop any new distribution relationships, such as that? So that's where key activities opens a firm's eyes in. Then if you look at key resources, it's right under key activities. They are the things that your organization needs in order to deliver value to your customers again. So it's always good to go back and forth with key activities and key resources. Key resources is something a firm already has, and if you go back and forth with key activities and key resources, you could see what you could utilize from key resources to deliver for your key activities. Now, value propositions. So this is basically like the benefit of what your service is going to give when you deliver to your customers. What are the pain points of your customers that you're trying to resolve? And the benefit could either be qualitative or even quantitative. Stuff like that. And then you go into customer relationships. These vary from company to company. So customer relationships is how a firm, in the supply chain, what stage they're in. Do they interact directly with the customer, or are they something like the middleman? And then we would go on to channels. So this is also another way to describe in how you would interact with your customers. Again, where in which stage you are in the business, how you would deliver your products or service to your customer. And it's normal for a business to have different channels for different customer segments. And it's important that a business maps these out, maps each of these channels out for the appropriate customer segment they're trying to target. And finally, we'll go into customer target. So custom segments. So custom segments are basically the end users in which a business is targeting. So this could be one end user, or it could be multiple end users. So we usually create personas for this, customer personas to usually, so a persona is like a fictional representative of what each custom segment is. So again, different products and services, they have different customers. So, if it's a business which has different products and services, it's important to clearly segment your customers and create different personas for them. And so let's go on to, so that's about it for the model, business model canvas. We'll now go into the research and define problem statement section. So this is where most of your ideation, where you would pick up insights and ideate based on those insights. So, so first, we would try to understand what the problem is, understand the problem. So how do we do that? We usually conduct primary market research, and then, so in this segment, we'll talk about what is primary market research, how to plan and conduct it, and how to analyze those research results. Because this is like a very important topic where you would have, in order for you to ideate, use design thinking methodologies, you would need to go through this phase. So primary market research is, usually finding data which is non-existent yet. This is full on hands-on. You're going out, you're talking to potential or actual customers and consumers, you're interviewing customers. So this allows you and your enterprise to validate your assumptions. You get first-hand feedback from your customers directly, and most importantly, it allows you as a firm to tailor your product and services accordingly to what your customers want, and in turn that meets the needs of your customers and your consumers. So when you iterate on that process, you're actually solving the actual problem. So go a bit. So now when you're about to plan your primary market research, it's always the aim is to always gather and find useful data in when you're planning your market research. You want to make sure that you're collecting information from the specific market segments your business is trying to get into or is already in, and you would try to validate those specific functions accordingly. So then the next step would be to do some initial background research, the second step. Then you're being informed about what information is already out there, so you wouldn't be spending unnecessary resources and time trying to find out something which already exists. Then you would go on to develop a hypothesis statement. So this is where you would draw the conclusion of your research. It's typically a guess as to how all these relationships between factors. It serves like as a basis for an experiment, whether the research you did was actually true or not. So that's where your hypothesis statement comes in. So now when you're doing primary market research, there's two methods. You can either do quantitative research or qualitative research. So quantitative research, it could be such as when we're doing a usability test in user experience, you would see how long a user would take time to complete a certain task through a mobile application, through a web application. So that would fall under quantitative research, because you would try to get like an average number, like an average second or an average minute, to see how long they would go on to complete that certain task. But quality research, it can't really be put into a number. It's more detailed. So such as, let's say you create a questionnaire with like open-ended questions. So these will be text questions. So you would try to affinity map all these insights you would get from qualitative research. It's more text-based rather than like a number. So that's what primary market research is. So this is where again, in conclusion, you would gather what your end users really want, what your customers really want, and then you would gather those insights, and you would map them, and you would couple them together and create and try to create a hypothesis statement based on that. So now, okay. Now we go into prototyping and product ideation. So now once you've gathered your primary research, you gathered all your insights. Now you already have like hypothesis statements. You know what pain points to address. You would go into your prototyping, product ideation. This is the stage where you would validate all the ideation you're going to be ideating based on those insights you gathered on the previous stage, and then you would probably create a prototype. So we'll go more into that. First of all, let's talk about what prototyping is. So prototyping is all about developing a representation of the solution. It could be a specific user flow. It could be a specific solution. So it gives users your end users the opportunity to experience and test out how the solution would meet their pain point, or meet their problem in somewhat sense. And a prototype is not necessarily functional. It could be built like as a sample product. It could be built on a prototyping tool if it's a software product. So the sole purpose of prototyping is it helps you validate your assumptions. It helps you get meaningful feedback from your users, which in turn you could go back into iterative process of your design thinking process, and you could derive insights from that, and again apply those insights into your ideation, and again add new things to your product or remove things from your product. So it helps. Even prototyping also helps focus on usability. It tests whether the solution actually meets the need as identified in the problem statement we created, in the hypothesis statement we created, if it actually meets those users' needs. So there's always like a confusion if prototyping and an MVP is somewhat similar. So, but before we go into that, we'll talk about the different types of prototyping. If you take it from a software development perspective, so we usually have low fidelity prototypes and high fidelity prototypes. So low fidelity prototypes are basically like a skeleton version of a software product, where you could, where it's quite easy to design, quite easy to make, and then go on to test. But most of the time, end users don't really understand it because there's not much. It doesn't really represent the final look and feel of a product. So this is where high fidelity prototypes come in. So these are like realistic examples of your end product, and your user can really interact with that. And again, low fidelity prototypes is usually, it could be either sketches, it could be on a piece of paper, whereas a high fidelity prototype is something you could actually use on a prototyping tool. So then we'll go in depth about what ideation is. So ideation usually happens even before the prototyping stage. So ideation is one of those parts where it's either let's say you're in design team and user experience teams, either most of the time, if you're not working alone, you're working as a team, you would do certain ideation exercises uh, to ideate certain solutions. Quick ideate, you do exercises such as crazy eights to come up with, crazy ideas to address that solution. No matter how bad you think that idea is, you would try to push it out because you never know, it could actually help solve that specific problem you're trying to solve. So, and the best part about ideation is as you keep ideating, when you're working in a team, you get to, harness that and you get to build on top of those ideas as well. So that's why ideation is quite important. Then, you can derive practical solutions and then you can go on and advance. And ideation also helps, form the roadmap of a product. So to address the problem definition statement. So again, ideation occurs before prototyping happens. It's usually a prototype is a result of ideation, where ideation was built on those insights gathered from the research phase. So the ideation process, it'll always push you to ask yourself if you're trying to solve that specific problem in the right way, because it always pushes you to think further, and it'll always challenge you to step beyond your first thought and do some deep thinking about your problem pathway. So once ideation is done, so let's just talk a bit about design strategy in practice. We learned about what design thinking is. We went through all the stages of design thinking, and when you combine corporate strategy together, a business could let's say you take various elements of a corporate strategy and design strategy and design thinking. This is where you bridge the gap between gap between design thinking and corporate strategy, and then you would go on to create a design strategy. So that is what implementing design strategy into design thinking into business strategy means. So that's all for my slides. So if you all have any questions, do ask me. You're more than free to ask me any questions. Be happy to answer them. And yeah. One of you all have asked to suggest more ideation techniques. So there's quite a few you could do, such as, something common that I've even come into practice is you could create like storyboards. This would take you like on a detailed journey on how a user would, it would give like a third person view of how a user would, try to, like, let's say, for example, we're trying to dispose garbage. We would try to see how they would do it in a real life scenario, and then you would actually try to map it into a software product, and how you could, you would try to think how a specific app could solve that specific problem, such as disposing garbage. So I would suggest probably storyboarding. You could do crazy eight as well. So those are like the most common ideation techniques right now. All right, I think that's all the questions for now. So so thank you for attending the webinar. So please stay in tuned with the next webinars the 9x comes in. Please give us a like and you could subscribe as well. So yeah, thank you.